Welcome everyone to the first session of Feminine Communication. So the reason why I was inspired to teach a 5-week communication intensive is because I noticed that a lot of women appear to be the full and complete package, but when it comes to communicating with the opposite sex, they struggle in this area. And so in this 5-week training, you will be learning the tools to communicate with men, not only to help you be found by a mate, but for your actual dating process, courtship, and your future marriage. Because the goal is not only for you to be in a healthy relationship, but to sustain it. And in order to sustain it, it's very important that you know how to communicate in a feminine and effective way. So if you don't know how to communicate properly, you are at risk with damaging the relationship that you prayed for. You are at risk for turning a good and positive thing into something negative. And so I can teach you how to be found and how to be approachable and how to meet someone, which we will touch on. But the question is, do you know how to communicate effectively in order to stay in a healthy relationship? Do you know how to communicate effectively in the dating process where a man wants to continue to pursue you, to introduce you to his family, and to include you in his plans? Do you know how to communicate in that feminine way that is attractive to that man, where he says there is something different about her? So there are many people who have abstained from sex until marriage, who went to church with their significant other faithfully, but when they got 1 or 2 years down the line, their relationship started to fail because they did not know how to communicate. You'll hear a lot of people say their number one relationship tip is communication. Communication is key. But what exactly does that mean? What exactly does that mean? Communication is key. No one teaches you or shows you exactly what that means. And that's what we're going to be discussing over the next 5 weeks. So you don't want to learn just how to get in a relationship. You want to learn how to sustain it. And that is based on how you communicate. So over the next 5 weeks, we're going to be touching on things from your tone to your body language to your emotional intelligence and your emotional maturity, all with the end goal of you saying, these 5 weeks, I have learned how to communicate effectively, and I have the tools I need in my toolbox to not only be in a healthy relationship, but to sustain it. So today, we are talking about tone. Did you know, in order to communicate effectively, you have to know how to manage your tone? Your tone has a profound impact on how people receive what you are saying. 38% of what people say is being received by their tone. 80% of what people say over the phone is received by tone. So that means when you're on the phone with somebody, 80% of what they are paying attention to is your tone of voice. That is what they're really honing in on, is your tone. And you may have heard the saying, it's not what you said, but it's how you said it. There is a way that you can speak and be assertive and be confident and have your message heard, but you have to have the proper tone. So when it comes to tone, there are 2 typical types of women. And I want you to let me know in the comment box if you are so led to let me know which one you identify with. So the two types of women that are associated with tone are the loud and aggressive woman and the soft and timid woman. These are the two categories that are typical for women. There's not too much of a gray area. Usually women, they can be loud, they can be aggressive, they can be very assertive. And then there's the woman who is non-confrontational. She's very soft-spoken. She's very timid. But what I want to teach on is that it's not about being one or the other. It's about getting to what I call the sweet spot. Now, the tone you would use, the sweet spot is the tone you would use to make men feel like they're wrapped in a cashmere sweater. So even in a disagreement, you can be in what I call the sweet spot. You never have to raise your voice, get crunk, get rude, none of that to get your message heard. If you have the proper tone, people will listen and receive what you have to say. So this is also based on emotional maturity, and I'm going to touch on that later on in this 5-week training. But you want to be intentional about really getting comfortable being in the sweet spot, and that's where you speak politely and you treat men with respect. So I believe that if you choose wisely in your relationships and you treat them kindly, you will have a sustainable relationship in marriage. Simply, if you just take those two things away from this evening, choose wisely and treat kindly. And you treat someone kindly by speaking to them in a respectful tone. So loud and aggressive women can make a man feel like they're being attacked. And when men feel like they're being attacked, they shut down. They feel like they can't talk to you anymore. They feel like they can't open up to you anymore, because anytime they try to do that, you're criticizing them, you're critical, you're questioning why they feel a certain way or why they said something the way they said it. And you're constantly on their back. And that's not being in the sweet spot. Your tone should not be putting someone into fight or attack mode, or even you shouldn't be interrogating either. That is not the sweet spot. So when you're first getting to know someone, women are typically very sweet, very kind, very playful and gracious. But when people start to get 3 to 6 months down the line, people start to get comfortable. They start to get comfortable with their tone. They start talking any kind of way. And as a woman, you need to be very cognizant of your tone. And just because you start to get time in a relationship, that's not the time to get comfortable and disrespectful. And I say that from experience. I was in relationships where, in the beginning you show the best side of you, and you're really sweet and you're kind, and you're a little bit soft spoken. But when you've been with someone for a year or two and they do something that you don't know, you can get this stank face and you're like, what? You know what I mean? So I want to teach you guys that when you notice yourself getting that way, that you have the reminder that, let me get back in the sweet spot, because I can communicate with this man in a way that he will listen without me getting aggressive or without me putting him in attack mode. And so what is great practice right now, for those of you that aren't in a dating relationship, you can get practice by being in the sweet spot by communicating with your coworkers, with your siblings, with your friends and family, and really being mindful on how you are reacting to them. Because truthfully, most people treat everyone similarly. So what I mean by that is I knew a woman who was in a relationship, and I knew if you paid me, I can tell you the way she talked to her husband was disrespectful. And how did I know that? Because she disrespected everyone around her, from her sisters, from her coworkers. And so what I'm saying is, someone who is consistently disrespectful to the people around them, they're not going to switch up and just be kind to their husband. They're going to be consistent around all groups of people. And I know that was true because they actually didn't end up staying together, but I know that her tone was a part of their separation, because not only was she very aggressive in her tone, she showed that in public places around people. So to get ahead of this, you can start practicing now with how you communicate with your friends, with your family, and your coworkers. You are around your coworkers 40 plus hours a week. And sometimes when I was working in corporate America, y'all, my coworkers would get on my last nerve. So it was great practice for me to still be respectful in my tone when I got annoyed or when I got frustrated. So in those environments, it's great practice to start sharpening those tools of perfecting your tone and staying in that sweet spot. And again, as a married woman, I've been married almost 6 years, and I have to check my tone. And I love teaching feminine communication training because it's a positive reminder to myself that when I get irritated or when I get annoyed, which are normal feelings and emotions, that I can still be respectful and I can still have the proper tone. Because when I tell you, my husband has said, Ashley, hold up your tone, I'm like, oh wait, I don't want to make him feel uncomfortable or make him feel attacked. You don't want to be comfortable making people feel uncomfortable around you. And a lot of times people in relationships, they're comfortable. They have this attitude, well, this is how I am, or they shouldn't have did this, and this is why I got loud, and this is why I did this. But you don't want to be that woman. You want to master your femininity by staying within your sweet spot. Now, having the proper tone, it will change the entire energy of your relationship. If the person that you are in a relationship knows that they can talk to you, that you respect them, it creates an environment of safety and security within that relationship. So the sweet spot is a balance of confidence and assertiveness. And when I say the sweet spot, I'm not talking about your specific tone of voice, meaning how you sound. You don't need to switch to have a high-pitched voice. Everyone's tone and voice sounds different. But I'm saying you can use your tone to be confident, be assertive, get your point across, get your needs and desires and wants across in a way that feels like you are wrapping that person in a cashmere sweater. So what I always recommend is using your tone to make things sound interesting. So when you're having a conversation, you don't want to be so dull and monotone, especially when you are in the dating scene. You want to have that playful, fun, energy, great conversation, liveliness about you. But if you are dull and monotone with your tone, nobody wants to be around that type of person for long periods of time. So you want to make sure that you are using your tone to elevate when necessary, to lower, to say, to listen, to engage, to laugh, to, you want to use your tone of voice because that contributes to showcasing your femininity. Now, you can ask yourself, am I an over talker or am I super quiet? Because when you're in the sweet spot, it doesn't mean you're just quiet and have your hands folded on your lap and you're not talking. No, you're still engaging. You're still being your authentic self, but you're staying in that sweet spot of being confident and assertive as well. So I want you to ask yourself, in your past 3 relationships, what has your median tone been overall? I want you to think about it for a second. Have you been the type who has not been mindful of your tone? Can you say you've had a loud and aggressive tone? Or has your median tone been in the relationship soft-spoken and timid? Where do you lie? Looking back on your past 3 relationships, where do you believe you have stood? Because if you're loud, aggressive, and critical, there's so much of that type of treatment that someone can take. I will never forget, I heard a quote that said, for every man that has a headache, there's a woman with an aspirin. So meaning, if you're in a relationship with someone and you're constantly giving them a headache, there is another woman who is willing to talk with them in a sweet tone, that is willing to wrap him with his words in a cashmere sweater. But if he has to come home or be in a relationship with someone who is loud and aggressive and critical, that is not going to sustain a healthy relationship. For every man with a headache, there is a woman with aspirin. And I won't forget, I was talking to a girlfriend of mine actually recently who is in her mid-30s, and she met this guy, and she was talking to me about the guy, and she was telling me how he was backing up from the relationship. He was really pursuing her, really engaged. They were hanging out, having a good time. But then she started to interrogate him. She was constantly asking him questions. Where does he see the relationship going? How long before they make it official? Asking him interrogating questions, which caused him to step back from the relationship. And she always wanted to know where the relationship was going, when they were going to be official. And the constant conversation it became overbearing. And her tone started to change. In the beginning of the relationship, she was fun, she was witty. And then it started to get overbearing with the constant questions and nagging on, where are we going? What are we doing here? Where he was still enjoying that getting to know her phase. So there's a way to speak to men so they don't feel pressured. And that is by being kind, asking thoughtful questions, and embracing your feminine nature. If you are in a relationship and you constantly feel like you have to force things along, you have to make such a great effort to determine where the relationship is going, that's probably not the relationship for you. When you're in relationships, you're able to embrace your femininity by knowing that what God has for you is for you, and that when you meet the man God has for you, you're not going to have to sell him on that fact. He will know it. And because he will know it, you can embrace your feminine nature and relax back into communicating with him in an effective, unforceful way. And that is the beauty of this teaching. So you have to have the type of presence that allows a man to be able to say the wrong thing and know that you won't go off on him, or he won't have to shut down knowing that you won't ask him a million questions on why he said something the way he said or the way he said it. You can ask questions when you're in that sweet spot to get an effective answer. You don't have to ask a man a million times to get the answer you desire. And I asked men what they saw when it came to a woman that they felt like they could no longer really pursue. And it was that aggressive nature. So understand, men aren't complicated. Let me say that again. Men are not complicated. You simply have to speak with them with compassion and do not overanalyze. We as women tend to overanalyze. We want to talk to our girlfriends about what he said and how he said it. And we want 20 different opinions on how the relationship is going. But at the end of the day, speak with compassion, ask thought-provoking questions, and stay in the sweet spot. So your tone should be friendly. It should be warm and caring. And you should be using warm tones. So example of a warm tone, I went to a friend of mine, her birthday dinner, and it was at a Japanese steakhouse. And it was the type of restaurant where the chefs cook in front of you and they're doing all of these tricks. And it was a really fun time. And it was multiple couples sitting around the chef's station. And the woman whose birthday dinner it was, she is a boss. She is the leader and founder of a thriving nonprofit organization. She hosts conferences that she raises over 6 figures to carry out. She's a master negotiator, has her MBA. She's a boss. But something that I observed about her, when we were at her birthday dinner and she was sitting next to her boyfriend, which is now her husband, she was sitting next to her husband, or excuse me, her boyfriend at the time. And she was very calm. She was using warm tones. She wasn't doing most of the talking. He was doing most of the talking, most of the joking. And her presence was so calm, so graceful, and so compassionate. And I honestly expected her to be different around her significant other. But I was so impressed to see that she was able to separate her work life and that busy hustle and bustle nature of her everyday work life to be calm and feminine around her man. So you don't have to bring that boss energy into a relationship. So you want to try to leave your work day at home. If you're going on a dinner date after a long day at work, you don't want to bring that energy into your dinner date. You want to gear yourself up to have a great time, to be witty, to be playful, to be genuine, and know that, okay, now is not the time and the place to talk about all the negative things that happened at work. Because essentially, you want a man to feel great around you. And yes, share a part of your day. I'm not saying don't share that, but don't focus on that. And definitely don't make your stresses and your complaints the topic of every single conversation. That will wear somebody down. So nobody wants to be in a relationship where they feel like they can't breathe, that they feel like it's overbearing, or they feel like when you ask them a question, they need immediate answers. Sometimes you just want to breathe and relax and have a great time. So I want you to practice using those lower warm tones, those friendly tones, those tones that show that you feel good about yourself, that you're fun to be around. It's not that complicated. It's simply recognizing when you're out of that sweet spot and getting back in it. So a rule of thumb is to use warm tones so you're not coming off as if you're attacking someone. So again, it's great to start practicing this with people that actually irritate you, because when you do that, you're strengthening the ability to respond in a way that you have a pleasant tone. Now, I also want to say, if you have a soft-spoken nature, you want to get in the sweet spot, because people that are too soft-spoken means you can easily be manipulated. It means you can easily be walked all over. And it's important that you have a standard. And so that's why I'm telling you the sweet spot is a mix of being confident and being assertive. Because if you're too soft-spoken, you can easily get taken advantage of. So if you have an aggressive nature, use warm, friendly tones. If you have a soft-spoken nature, you want to get in the sweet spot so you are not easily manipulated. Now, something else you want to do is think about the women you grew up around. What did you grow up witnessing? Specifically, your mom. How did she communicate with men? Because 9 times out of 10, the way your mother communicated with men will identify how you communicate with them. We typically replicate what we see growing up. So if you grew up in a household where your mom was aggressive, she talked to your dad or her husband or her boyfriend in a very aggressive way, you are most likely repeating that. Same if you're soft-spoken. And I want you to ask yourself, what is my family history? What did I grow up witnessing? For me personally, my mom was controlling. She really tried to organize everything. And I have some of that within me. And now that I've recognized that, I'm more mindful when trying to handle everything, because that's what I saw growing up. My mom was a single mother the majority of my life. And when she did get into relationships, she was very independent, very assertive, very controlling, kept things in order. And sometimes it wasn't in the most feminine way. And so for me, I look back at that and I say, I can see how being in a household in an environment like that has influenced how I behave. And so I simply am more mindful when I am navigating through my own personal relationship. So what is your family history? I want you to think of the 3 women in your life. Your aunt, maybe it's your grandmother or your mother, or maybe it's one of your best friend's moms that you feel like you grew up at her house. How did they communicate with men? One of my friends, she told me that she never, ever witnessed her parents being affectionate. She said they were literally like roommates. And I thought that was very interesting, because she was saying your history and your past environment creates in your mind what you believe should be normal. And because she didn't see a lot of affection in her home, she thought that was kind of normal after being married to someone for so long. She would say, my parents were married 20 plus years. Isn't that normal? They're not affectionate anymore. Isn't it normal that they seem like roommates? And I'm like, no, that's not normal. And that does not have to be your reality. So be mindful of your tone. And another good piece of advice is that when you think of the person you are dating and the person that you're in a relationship with, picture them as an infant. I know that sounds kind of silly, but this is really a good way to communicate with people. Because when you look at the person you're married to and you're dating as their baby picture, you're going to change the way you talk to them. Because you're not going to talk to an infant in an aggressive or hateful way. You picturing that person as an infant will help you control your tone. And it is so funny to me that some women will treat a telemarketer more respectful than they will treat their man. If a telemarketer calls, you'll say, hello, this is Ashley, or hello. You'll have an upbeat, friendly tone versus when your man calls, if you've been with them for a long period of time, you may answer the phone without saying hello. You might just say, yeah. Like, what? Yeah, huh? So be mindful of your tone and make sure you're staying in the sweet spot. And you guys see, these are my precious little babies. That's Theodore on the right, and that was Chesley as a baby on the left. And just seeing their little baby pictures, even now I have to practice this with my daughter Chesley, who's a toddler, who can be very challenging at times, throwing temper tantrums. I have to remember this little baby Chesley, and it helps me check my tone. So 3 out of 4 men said that women are too aggressive with their tone. 3 out of 4 men said that. So women who are too aggressive, and they say, when I asked women who label themselves as the loud and aggressive, that's the category that they identify with the most. When I asked them how their mother was, they said their mom was the same way. So you want to make sure that you're getting in that sweet spot, that you are managing your tone, even in times where you feel irritated and annoyed. You can start building that muscle, start navigating yourself back to that sweet spot where you are listening and responding from a place of kindness, warmth, and compassion. So again, men are incredibly simple. It is up to us as women to really watch the way that we speak and watch the way we're analyzing things so we don't overcomplicate them. So your tone essentially is determined by your internal state. Let me say that again. Your tone is determined by your internal state. If you are not at peace and you are on edge, if you are constantly stressed out at work, if people are constantly asking you to do things, if you are constantly being pulled from right to left like a rag doll, your tone is going to reflect that. That is going to be shown in your tone. That is why it's so important to utilize self-care and really self-reflect on your current emotional state. Anytime that I am irritable or I have a unkind tone with my kids or my husband, it's literally because I've been overwhelmed with all of my responsibilities. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and it's a reflection of my internal state. And so that's why I say, if you notice that your tone is snappy, irritable, it's most likely time for you to utilize self-care. Irritations will always come out in your tone if you're not mindful of this. And it typically is not even about the other person. It's all about how you are feeling internally. When you're at peace and you're serene and you're loving yourself and you're loving the season you're in, if you are managing your day, if you are organized and you're feeling good, that is going to be reflected in your emotional state, which in turn, which will be reflected in your tone. So I wanted to tell you that your assignment for this week is to practice being mindful with your tone. Now, I believe that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So don't be surprised if this week someone approaches you in a way that makes you question everything that I just taught. But it will be your opportunity to grow. It will be your opportunity to develop in this area and practice being in the sweet spot. So this week, practice being mindful with your tone. Practice being mindful with your responses. Notice whether you are responding or reacting. Notice the types of people where you are intentional about having a kind and compassionate tone versus the people that you don't care how you're coming off. Really be mindful of that and practice your tone this week and being in the sweet spot. So I hope you found this content valuable. And I hope that it really makes you reflect on your past relationships and your past encounters with people, whether or not you have been mindful with your tone, or after a certain period of time, did you get lax with your tone? So again, the goal of feminine communication with men is to stay in that sweet spot, to stay in the place of confidence and assertiveness, so you are not looked at as a pushover, but that you're also not looked at as a loud and aggressive woman.